2024-25 featured a change in the Atlantic Division playoffs for the first time in a while. Will we get another change in 25-26? That's coming up here on the Locked On NHL podcast.
This is the Locked On Podcast Network's 2025 NHL season preview. Your team every day.
What's up, hockey fans? Welcome in to another great season as we get rolling here towards the 2025-26 NHL season. Welcome in to the Locked On NHL podcast season preview series. We're here talking about the Atlantic Division today. My name is Joe DiBiase from the Locked On Sabres podcast, joined by Brian Fisher from the Locked On Red Wings podcast, Ian McLaren from Locked On Bruins, and then Ian Boisvert from the Locked On Canadiens podcast, as we are not fully the non-playoff teams from last season. Ian B from up there, not in Montreal, but covering the Canadiens. You made the playoffs last year, so you're looking to repeat. We got a couple of droughts over here on this side, and we're looking for a better and brighter season. I'm sure everybody is a step in the right direction for these four teams. So a lot to get to coming up on today's show. We're going to look at the offseason additions and subtractions from each of these teams, what the expectation is for each. We'll take a look at the over-unders at the betting markets over our buddies at FanDuel Sportsbook, what the level of expectation is for everybody as well. So a lot of fun, a lot to get to coming up as we get rolling towards the hockey season. And we can jump right into it on starting with you, Ian, on the Habs last year and making the playoffs. So tell us, especially here in Buffalo, someone who hasn't seen his team make it since he was 15. What are the playoffs like? What's that like?
It was a lot of fun last year. I've always thought that the teams that you don't expect to do well, that are sort of making the steps in the right direction, are the most fun to watch, right? There's no expectations. We're not white knuckling it through games. We're having a good time watching Lane Hudson just ball out every night. We're having a fun time just watching Nick Suzuki have a career year. And we get rewarded at the end of the year with a playoff berth. They clinched on the last day of the regular season for them. A season that didn't start all that well. They struggled out of the gate. They lost Patrick Laine last year for a good portion of it, and he comes back and he's electrifying. It was really exciting. It was exciting to get rewarded for those years of the tank. It's something that, you're sold that as the trade-off where, if we tank and we are intentionally bad for a few years, we will get rewarded with this. It's not every team gets rewarded with it. And I think the Canadiens were very early in that. We were a lot quicker than any of us expected the Canadiens to be in that position. So coming into this season, we're feeling great. There's a little bit higher expectations, but I think we're still kind of in the same feeling. We're very much like, we didn't really, expect to be there. We might not really expect to be there again this year. So let's just enjoy another, young season with these guys.
Yeah. And making the playoffs even could just take a little bit of that pressure off your back, little monkey off your back if you're the coaching staff and management too. And I think that can open things up for what they do as well. Ian McLaren joining us this year. You're not normal to our show on our side here. I wonder from your perspective, because looking up at the division, this division has had no parity over the years. It is rare that one of Toronto, Tampa, Florida in the last 3 years, and Boston have all been right there in the postseason, or at least close to it. And last year, a very big difference. So we'll get to it, but could not have been a fun season for Bruins fans.
No, it's it was definitely a situation the last few years where there was a clear top four, bottom four in the Atlantic Division. For the Bruins, there's no one thing that went wrong for them last year. There was just so many ingredients in the soup that ended up being, pretty rank and inedible at the end of the season. And, it started with Jeremy Swayman's prolonged contract stalemate and how public that was in training camp. He missed all of the exhibition season, wasn't even back for the season opener. And then you had, of course, Jim Montgomery fired. You had the kind of exodus of core guys at the trade deadline, including Captain Brad Marchand, Charlie McAvoy getting injured at Four Nations, Hampus Lindholm out. There was just so many things that went wrong. And the vibes around Bruins fans pretty low right now, already on edge here, even in the preseason. And really hoping for, not everything to go right or to kind of turn around overnight, but at least some more things to go in their favor. I know to many hockey fans that would seem ridiculous for Bruins fans to kind of be looking for things to go in their favor after such a long string of success. But there is some optimism under new head coach Marco Sturm. Not as much optimism when it comes to roster composition, but when it comes to coaching staff and the vision, it seems to be somewhat on track, at least heading into this season.
Sure. No, and that level of winning will always raise the bar. It's a different life that you live when you've done that for so many years. And then finally, introduce everyone to Brian Fisher, my drought brother from Detroit here. Sabres with the longest drought in NHL history, the Red Wings with the fourth longest drought in NHL history. So we have definitely felt the short end of the stick on that parity in the division. Detroit's come a little closer than Buffalo has in the last couple of years. So I don't know where you are after last season going into this year. But man, it would be fun to just do some shows and some previews of playoff series at some point. That'd be fun, hopefully.
Yeah, I've been doing this since 2022, I believe. Was Raymond Insider's rookie year, so I have not covered a playoff game yet. After 25 consecutive years of making the playoffs, it's been a long, drawn-out rebuild, which, Joe, I'm sure you can relate to.
Oh, yeah.
But as far as vibes go, tense is I think a lot of what Red Wings fans are feeling. We've had Yzerman as the general manager since 2019, so this would be year 7, I think, by the end of the season, and Red Wings fans feel as if it's been dragging on for a little bit too long. And myself, going into the offseason, said, okay, the drafting and the development of young players has been phenomenal. You look at Lucas Raymond at 4th overall. He and Tim Stützle look like the best 2 players from that draft. Even after they get screwed in the weird expanded draft lottery that year, because they did the 2 draft lotteries, and the Red Wings somehow fell to 4th, they got Lucas Raymond out of it. Year prior, Yzerman reached for Moritz Seider. He became a Calder Trophy winner, and last year established himself as one of the, in my opinion, one of the best two-way defensemen in the league. The development's been great. Lots of young prospects in the pipeline. The issue then becomes the pro scouting has been abysmal. The contracts that they have signed in free agency have been rough. Andrew Kopp hasn't lived up to expectations. JT Compher hasn't lived up to expectations. Ben Sherratt has been overslotted. I will defend him in that element that he's playing way higher than he probably should be, but they also signed him to a contract to do that, which again, bad contract yet again. So it's those acquisitions made through free agency that largely have not panned out. And so a lot of Red Wings fans going into this offseason said, okay, young talent's here, but you need to supplement this young talent with an impact move. And kind of not through entirely his own fault, right? This last offseason, who became available? Everyone signed with their team, and the ones who didn't knew already where they wanted to go because the cap was surging up. Everyone had the money to retain their guys, and so nobody had to trade trade anyone away through cap crunch either. So it's definitely tense in Detroit because we were ready for this team to make the playoffs, especially after missing out on a tiebreaker 2 seasons ago. But at the same time, looking at similar to Ian of Bruins was bringing up, it's hard to see them breaking through with this roster composition unless internal growth ensues.
Yeah, that the cap point is really good. Ehlers goes to Carolina, but otherwise, half the league has more than $4 million in cap space that they couldn't use because there just weren't enough guys that were worth it. So maybe we'll see that filled out in the coming years. So we're going to take a look at the over-unders, our best positive spin on each team as well. I'm going to try really hard for Sabre fans on that one. So that's coming up here. And here, if you're watching along on YouTube, we got the over-unders up there. Montreal at 92.5 over at FanDuel Sportsbook for their point total. The Sabres coming in at 86.5. That even surprised me a little bit. That was a little lower a couple weeks ago. I think it's actually been bet up, but 86.5 for the Sabres. Detroit at 83.5, and then Boston down at 79.5. So the betting line not being kind to the Bruins line on the season. So Ian Boisvert, we'll start with you on Montreal for that total and best sales pitch for them hitting the over 92.5. Would that even be a successful season in your mind, just barely getting over that threshold and maybe squeaking into the playoffs again? Or do you think the most optimistic point of view for Montreal is something beyond that?
I think it's a reasonable aspiration for them to hit the over on this one. Last year, they made the playoffs with 91 points, which wouldn't have been enough in the West. The West would have been, the Flames would have beaten them out to get into the playoffs if they were in the Western Conference. So I think I'm going to take the over. This feels like a 95-point team. And I say that because, they're getting a full season out of Patrick Laine, whether or not that is, what they're, what they need, they're going to get it. They're getting a new guy in Noah Dobson. They're getting the odds-on favorite to win the Calder Trophy in Ivan Demidov. There's a lot to be excited about them adding to this roster.
E&M, the Bruins, 79.5. That's a low total. What's your most optimistic view of the Bruins, and would you be over or under on that number?
In terms of the Bruins, they finished 76 points last season, tied for worst in the Eastern Conference. I find it hard to believe that they can't muster at least 2 more wins to get back to 80 points to hit the over on this. Like I said before, Hampus Lindholm's coming back, Charlie McAvoy coming back. You take any top 2 defensemen off any team in the NHL, and that's certainly going to hurt. Bring them back. Hopefully that will also help Jeremy Swayman to reestablish himself as a hang goaltender in the NHL. The biggest question for the Bruins is who's going to score beyond David Pastrnak. He had 106 points last season. The next closest guy was Morgan Geekie with 57, which is
Huge
just a
gap.
Staggering difference. I know the Bruins bottomed out, but David Pastrnak should be more in the MVP conversation, maybe this season if they're challenging for a wild card spot. I don't think they're going to make the playoffs. I think they're at best like second wild card team, maybe sneaking in. But to suggest that they can't muster at least 4 more points than they did last year seems
for me, like if Swayman can have an incredible year too, like I think he's capable of that, but it's just he's gonna have to be way better than he was last year, obviously.
Definitely.
Brian, 100%. On the Red Wings this year, 83.5 is their total, which is a very familiar season to what they've had in the past couple of years. They've been a little bit above that in recent seasons. So what do you like about that number, over or under, and what is the high end? What's the most optimistic view for you on Detroit?
I'm taking the over on this one. Actually, Scotty and I did a whole episode on this over-under, and we personally were – they finished with 86 points last year. It was a tumultuous – oh, my God, I can't say that word right. It was a difficult season last year. Yes, it's late. And they went through a coaching change. They went through a long slump of losing. Then they went through highs of 2 7-game win streaks. They finished with 86 points. The year prior, they finished with 90, 91, again, missing on the tiebreaker. I think their absolute ceiling is what we saw from the Montreal Canadiens last year. 91, 92 points, clinching the final wild card seed. I can see that. I think 83.5 is actually a little low because I see them easily replicating their point production from last year. I think that's honestly the slot is like 85, 86 points. I think that's likely where they end up. Missing the playoffs, which sucks to predict for my own team, unless, of course, going back to what I was saying earlier, internal growth happens. Like, if Marco Kasper and Simon Edvinsson can take that step, great rookie years, can they take the step into being legitimate, impactful NHL players at the top of the lineup? If that happens, in a good spot. If newcomer John Gibson can be the goalie that we hope he can be in Detroit, playing behind a albeit marginally better defense in Detroit over Anaheim. Like, there are factors in play that I think Detroit's going to hit that over regardless, but at their absolute best, I think they can get to about 91. If they hit below a 500-point percentage, I would be shocked because rostered or like year to year, year over year, this roster is really not any different. And I think Todd McLellan, in a full season with the Detroit Red Wings, is going to help a lot because as much as I approved of Derek Lalonde's, and I'll wear that because I was in Derek Lalonde's corner, he's a little bit rigid Lalonde was in his belief, and I think the team kind of suffered from that. The offense and creativity stagnated. McLellan came in and immediately, first practice he had is play effing hockey. You've done it your whole lives. He wants the team to rely on their instincts. Now they have this system that's based fully on gas all the time. 100%.
Mm-hmm.
Do not ride the brakes. If you make a mistake, I'd rather you make a mistake because you were trying rather than being afraid to make a mistake. And last year, it felt a lot like they didn't want to make mistakes rather than trying to win hockey games.
Yeah. That sounds a lot like what the Sabres were a couple years ago when they missed the playoffs by 1 point and they abandoned that strategy and they haven't been as good since.
Joe,
I've criticized them a lot for it.
I have actually compared the Red Wings from 2 years ago to the Sabres of 3 years ago a lot because it was a lot of just trying to outscore your problems.
Yeah, Don Granato used to say all the time, don't worry. Like they were the youngest guys in the league. Like, don't worry about making mistakes. Just go try to score as many goals as you can. Be aggressive. That team just didn't have a goalie, right? Like if you're going to play that way, you got to get a few saves, and they just got none, and they still almost made it.
Detroit hasn't had a goalie since Jimmy Howard. So
well, it's funny. You can yell at me if you need to, because my reason for optimism on the Buffalo Sabres is taking the goalie that would go under your umbrella of they haven't had a goalie in a while. The Sabres had Alex Lyon in the offseason, and I don't know that I'm expecting Alex Lyon to come in and be some Vezina candidate as the reason why I think the Sabres could reach their ceiling, which I'm with you guys. Like it's around like low 90s points, maybe a little lower than what I would think Montreal's best season is. It's got to come with goaltending, though. The Sabres are trying to play a much more defensive style. They have not been successful at doing that in the last 2 years as they've been trying to. And I'm in a better place than I have been in the past because the last couple of years been just hope it's Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. And that's kind of it. It's him and a rookie. It's been the goalie setup the last couple of years, or James Reimer off waivers. This year, I don't know which one it will be or if any of them will, but between Luukkonen, Alex Lyon, and Alex Georgiev, 3 NHL goalies, I think they're just throwing darts and hoping, close your eyes and hope that one of them is able to give you a decent season. So if the Sabres can get that to work, I think they could be like a 91, 92 point team. But I think the possibilities that they're lower, there's way more of them. So some reason for optimism, but if I'm being realistic, I think the Sabres are probably underneath that 86.5 point total. Coming back on the other side, what were our team's biggest offseason additions and some breakout candidates to look for from Detroit, Montreal, Boston, and Buffalo? All coming back here on a season preview edition of the Atlantic Division on the Locked On NHL podcast. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there is Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool, helps bring your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or on your phone. Monarch is built for people with busy lives. If you've put off organizing your finances, Monarch is for you. Monarch does all the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. I like it best. It helps keep track of how often I'm going out to eat. And also, you and your partner helps keep that in line as well. So don't let financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with the code LOCKEDONNHL. Welcome back. Joe DiBiase, Brian Fisher, Ian McLaren, and Ian Boisvert from Locked On Canadiens, Bruins, Red Wings, and Sabres, all getting ready for the 2025-26 season. And it was a long off season, longer for some than others. It was a weird off season. More cap space for all these teams, but not a lot of top players that were available to fill that up. So, Ian, we'll start with you on Montreal. What type of offseason was it for the Canadiens, and what would you call their biggest offseason addition?
It was funny. It was a quiet offseason, and then there were 2 big pops. They didn't, the Canadiens spent a lot of time probably just checking the trade market. Kent Hughes is very active in that. Just, his past as an agent, I think, lends itself to him constantly wanting to know what's going on out there. The big one happened the day of the draft with Noah Dobson coming to Montreal and immediately signing an 8-year contract worth $9.5 million a year. Montreal gives up not a lot in the immediate sense, right, but the package is substantial. It's 2 first-round picks and Emil Heinemann, who was beloved in Montreal in his brief time with the Canadiens. Heineman, of course, last year was I think he was like top 5 in rookie goal scoring, and then he got hit by that car in Utah, and like his season just fell apart. Like he broke his wrist. They joked like Heineman was a physical player. They joked that the car was totaled. It was.
I completely forgot about this.
It was a wild story. I remember I got a text from my friend like Heineman got hit by a car. I was like, "Excuse me, I didn't."
I think we all just reacted like, "Wait, that was real? You weren't like using an analogy?" Like, no, he actually got hit by a car.
No, it was a state vehicle in Utah.
Yeah.
So be careful on the streets. But it was a substantial trade to get Noah Dobson in Montreal, and it's a piece that a lot of teams I think were after. It's a right shot, mobile puck moving defenseman capable of a 70-point season like we saw. What'll be interesting to see is he's not on the alpha power play unit in camp. That's obviously going to be Lane Hutson's chair for the remainder of his time in Montreal, you'd have to imagine. But he gets a pretty substantial power play unit in he gets Ivan Demidov and Patrick Laine and Kirby Dach up front. So it'll be interesting to see how he slots in from an offensive perspective. They also grabbed Zach Bolduc in a trade with the St. Louis Blues. They trade Logan Mailloux back the other way. With them grabbing Dobson and already having Reinbacher, Mailloux becomes expendable, another mobile right shot defenseman. And they get a guy who's going to slot in on another power play unit, the one with Nick Suzuki and Cole Caulfield, and he's going to play the bumper. They added a lot of, they're starting to add more talent to help them now, which I think is key to their rebuild turning the corner. We're not trading for futures anymore. We're trading futures away. This summer marked a big milestone in the rebuild, in that it seems like the future is still important, but the now is becoming more important. And then, of course, we spent all summer talking about Sidney Crosby coming to Montreal. I don't necessarily. That's fun, though. It's super fun. There's only so much of it I can do before I stop even believing myself when I say it.
Get ready to do more of it, because the Penguins are going to be really bad again, and that's going to be the story again.
Yeah. So I mean, that's always going to be in the back of Canadiens fans' minds until we learn otherwise. It'd be fun, but again, that's very much a pipe dream at this point.
Yeah, it's either he retires or he goes to Colorado. One of those two things happens, and then you probably stop talking about it. But otherwise, it's fun to even entertain the possibility. Some of us can't live the life of Crosby thinking about their team. Big Dobson move. You're right. Like, there were a lot of teams in on him. The Sabres were trying to get him, but he didn't want to sign an extension with a bunch of teams. Montreal was one that he was willing to. So that's honestly one of the bigger moves, I think, in the NHL the offseason. I mean, by salary, it is. Right? Yep. $10.5 million per year for that.
He's their highest paid player going into the season. It's crazy. It's a big move for the Canadiens.
Ian on the Bruins, Ian McLaren of Locked On Bruins. What was their biggest offseason addition?
That's a tough one. They didn't really do a ton in terms of adding to the roster. They had done some of the heavy lifting at the trade deadline last year by subtracting. I mentioned Middlestat. They had some money to spend in free agency, upwards of, let's say, after signing some depth guys, they sell at about 8 million, 7.5. They turned that into the Jeannot signing, and then they traded for Victor Arvidsson. So that those two guys kind of take up what could have been a contract signed by a better player. As we have mentioned, those guys weren't that available. Arvidsson, I guess, a bit of a flyer on him. The biggest additions, though, were
James Hagen's falling to 8. I was going to say,
exactly. Yeah,
a year ago, if I had told you James Hagen's going to fall to 8 to the Bruins, one, you'd be mad they missed the playoffs, but you'd probably be happy he fell.
Yes. Like the Bruins, there was a chance at one point they could maybe get within the top 5. Once they fell to 7 in the draft, who knows who you're going to get. Hagens was at one point the number 1 prospect from that draft. And to get him, that was a huge get for the Bruins in the draft.
And then for you, Brian, so the Red Wings offseason. You mentioned the John Gibson trade earlier. I was a little jealous of that move. Only a second-round pick to get Gibson. I mean, he's got potential, even though it's maybe been a while since he had his best seasons in Anaheim. But is that the biggest move you think that Detroit had?
Yeah, without a doubt. It was just to go through the full trade, since you did mention it there. It was Peter Mrazek, who they picked up at the trade deadline. The only move they made at the deadline was acquiring Peter Mrazek, and Craig Smith from Chicago, who had, 2 points. They traded away a second and a 4th round pick for John Gibson. So essentially a second round pick, right? Because fourth round picks can become something, but oftentimes they don't.
Peter Mrazek, 4% of the time. It's like very low.
And you upgraded at goaltending, right?
Yep.
So John Gibson, without a doubt, is the biggest acquisition that the Detroit Red Wings made this offseason. I alluded to it earlier that they haven't had stability in net for years since Howard's retired. It's been we had Thomas Greiss, we had Nedeljkovic, we've had Ville
Reimer
Husso,
for a second, right?
James Reimer, who then went to Buffalo. We had Alex Lyon, who then went to Buffalo. Cam Talbot. And, there's a common theme amongst every single one of these goalies, especially the most recent ones, in Nedeljkovic, Husso, and Talbot, in that, and even Lyon. When we start playing them, they play out of their effing mind. They play incredible. And then, because the Red Wings have no other goalie, and because they have no defense, we wear them into the ground. The Red Wings wear them into the ground, and by the end of the season, they're not performing the way they did at the start of the year. John Gibson comes with a body of work that suggests he can play in a starter's role. So that was, without a doubt, their best acquisition. I mean, they acquired James Van Riemsdyk, so now we have the number 1 and number 2 overall pick from 2007.
JVR is still out here playing hockey.
Right.
He has 16 goals this year, getting 12 assists, I guarantee it.
And if that's what he does, that's
a
what he
win.
does, huge win.
Yeah.
Because the Red Wings' depth scoring last season, anyone outside the top 2 lines was terrible.
Biggest addition for the Sabres this offseason. It's funny, it's going to be one of the two is going to be the guy that you just talked about they replaced in Detroit. But it was part of why the Gibson move I thought was smart was the free agency marketed goalie. There was nothing. It was Jake Allen, who didn't even move teams. He stayed in New Jersey. And then it was Alex Lyon. Those were the top 2 names. So you can say the Sabres got the number 1 free agent goalie that changed teams, but it's not like you're expecting, again, super high results, but it's something. It's better than what they had from before. It's a dart throw. So I think the Lions signing is one of them. And then Michael Kesselring from Utah. It took too much to get him, but last year's a little lesson here of, sometimes if you overpay on a deal, but if it's the thing you need, it can end up looking okay. That's what happened last year. The Sabres way overpaid to get Ryan McLeod because they needed a third line center. Top 10 pick they gave up. I still would tell you in value, that wasn't a smart deal. But on the immediate, they got a third line center who scored 20 goals for them, which was a massive upgrade. So, and he's only 25. It's not like he's 30. So, yeah, they overpaid for Michael Kesselring to come play defense for them, 6'5". They've been dying for a partner for Owen Power on the second pairing, and they just have not been able to find anyone to really help him take a big step forward. So I think Kesselring is the idea for that. I'm optimistic that can work. Not telling you he's worth JJ Peterka, but I do think he's a big piece of what they needed. So, and then very quickly around the room, one name very quickly on your breakout candidate for the season. Brian, you're going with Marco Kasper in Detroit?
Yeah, let's go Marco Kasper.
All right, I'm going Zach Benson in Buffalo. I think that's a pretty easy one for me. Ian on Montreal, who would you say is their breakout candidate this year?
It's tough to not go with Ivan Demidov, right? He's probably the odds-on favorite to win the Calder. Name to watch this year, although I don't know. I needed to alert anybody to that fact.
He probably is the betting favorite to win the Calder. I'll look at that. And then Ian on Boston, who's their breakout candidate?
Go a bit off the radar. I'm going to say Matej Blumel led the AHL in goals last season. He's getting a pretty good look in training camp so far, and I think he could really pop.
When we come back, we'll wrap things up by looking at what happens if these teams don't make the playoffs, and who do we like of our 4 teams here as the most likely team to jump in, or in Montreal's case, stay in. That's coming up here on a season preview edition of the Locked On NHL podcast. Back here talking some 25-26 NHL season, Atlantic Division. Hockey is almost back. You can hear the pucks hitting the boards. You can hear the skates, cutting across the ice. We're almost there. Atlantic Division, and these 4 teams all looking to take steps forward and, in some of our cases, make the playoffs for the first time in a long time. Well, what if that doesn't happen? What's at stake if it does not happen that their teams make the playoffs? And Ian, on Montreal, I think their answer might be a little different than ours because, again, the pressure of having just made it the year before, maybe a narrow miss for them is different than these other teams. But What would you say on that? What coaching in danger, roster decisions, GM, or would it pretty much just be status quo, you think, if they don't make it?
I think it would have to depend on how badly they miss. If they're fighting until April 3rd and they get eliminated, I think we're probably just saying, all right, it's another year. The Canadiens by all metrics are still one of, if not the youngest teams in the National Hockey League. They kept most of their young core there, and they subtracted guys like David Savard, who just retired. Christian Dvorak signed for way too much money in Philadelphia. Yoel Armia goes back with Mark Bergevin in Los Angeles. So they lost a lot of veterans on that team. So there might be some growing pains here. They've kind of turned the roster over to the kids. The front office has always said they want that young core to take ownership of the team. Well, it's their team now. I think there's some, there might be a sophomore slump of sorts for this core, not for each individual player. I think it also depends on how healthy Kirby Dach can stay this year. If he can solidify that second line, they're probably still in pretty good shape. If not, maybe they're on the outside looking in. But they're not going to fire Marty St. Louis if things go poorly. Kent Hughes and Jeff Gorton are reportedly working on extensions to stay with the Montreal Canadiens in their front office positions. The vibes are good in Montreal, regardless of they're making the playoffs or not this year. Obviously, it would be seen as a failure if they miss, but not so much so where you start ripping up the foundation on what they've already built.
Ian, what about for Boston? What's at stake if they don't miss? I mean, the coach just got there, Marco Sturm. This is, I'm guessing, a Don Sweeney question?
Yeah, you'd think so, but after bottoming out this past season, they actually went out and signed Don Sweeney to a contract extension this summer. So the expectations are always pretty high in Boston. I think this season, if they fall down once again, it might be acceptable because the 2026 NHL draft is going to be pretty strong. They got a couple first-round picks. Sturm is going to have more than one season to try to work things out. What's at stake, I think, for the Bruins is just wasting a prime year from David Pastrnak, which they did this past season as well. And that would be a real shame. He is one of the elite players in the NHL, and I don't think the NHL nor the Bruins really have done enough to kind of make him the face. I would have made him captain already if it was up to me, and just kind of wasting one of his prime years and kind of risking having him kind of question whether he fits into the long-term plans. He's approaching 30. It's kind of going to be thinking I want to add a cup to my resume here. Is this actually going to be the best place to do it?
Yeah, one of the best players in the world. Brian, what about the Red Wings? Where are we at in the Yzer plan? If the drought hits 10, who's on the hot seat? Could it be Yzerman? It's so tough, right? He's a legend of the franchise. I'm sure you talk about this every day, but where are they at if they miss again?
So this is an interesting situation because the narrative in the media and amongst the fans would be, if you don't believe his seat is already hot, it should be hot if they miss the playoffs again. So a lot of people in the fan base who are already fed up, this guy's seat is hot. We have to make a decision if we keep missing the playoffs. I don't believe that is the reality of the situation, though. It's not about him being a legend, which he is, of course, Steve Yzerman, one of the best to ever do it. It's that he has the full trust of ownership. Ownership, from all reports, is fully bought into his plan. And, in defense of that plan, I see the logic there. But eventually, you got to see that leap get taken. But he doesn't show his hand. He's very steady. He says, when we make the playoffs, we'll be a playoff team. We are rebuilding for as long as we're not in the playoffs. He says things like that. They interviewed him after they drafted Marco Kasper, and they go, where are you at in the rebuild? He goes, have we made the playoffs? Well, we're still rebuilding. So it's very intentional. He doesn't like to explain or expound upon or expand upon the plan because he doesn't want to do what the old Ottawa GM did, where he goes, the rebuild is over, and then miss the playoffs for 3 more straight years, because then you're really under fire. So what's at stake? I don't really think anything, unfortunately, and that's a very nihilistic answer, but I'm being honest.
No, it's tricky. You almost can't, hockey's not going to have a lot of these examples. I'm almost thinking about in football when John Elway's the Broncos GM.
Right.
And like, what do? He's the all-time player of your franchise, but it was going so poorly. And I think they bumped him up to president, which was almost kind of like a quasi, we just got to get you out of the day-to-day operations seat. But
Right.
that was years and years of him failing at the job before they ever did that.
Well, and the difficult part of it is it's not even that he's doing a terrible job either. Like, he's doing really good at some things, and he's doing some bad things poorly. And so, when do you draw the line as an owner and go, okay, this isn't working out? Because again, going back to what I said at the beginning, the drafting and development of young talent, the identification of young talent has been fun. They have a 7th-round pick right now taken in 2023, the same year as the Bedard draft, that during training camp and preseason is playing on a line with Larkin and Raymond, and he's just playing his way through it, and Emmett Finney. So it's just, again, the bad stuff is the pro scouting and free agent acquisition. So it's like it's a real give and take with his tenure right now.
And then finally on the Sabres here, what's at stake? I mean, I kind of think everything is at stake this year. I think this is quietly an enormous season for the Sabres. And while I might not have a full expectation it's going to go well for them, I think if it goes poorly, I think it could all blow up again, which would be the 3rd time maybe in this drought that you could say that, because guys' patience runs out. And I think it starts at the player level. The rumor about Dahlin maybe wanting out last deadline, that was a bust. That wasn't true, but it's an alarm bell. It's okay. It might not have been true that day, but one day it will be. You can't miss the playoffs forever and have your best players go into their 9th, 10th seasons in the league and expect that they're just going to be okay with that when they're playing at the peak of their position in the NHL. So I don't know what's going on in Dahlin's head or what's going on in Tage Thompson's heads, but those guys have been here for 7 years now. And there's only so much of this that I think you can take. If you're a highly competitive person, I would question a player's competitiveness if they were willing to just do this for the rest of their career. So eventually that patience runs out. That's at the player level. And at the GM level, I mean, in my opinion, it should already be over. I mean, GMs don't get a 6th season when they've never made the playoffs. That rarely happens. Like, I think Pierre Dorian is actually the only other example of it with the Ottawa Senators recently. So, but part of it is kind of what Brian said. Like, it's up to the owner, and the owner loves Kevin Adams, and he's been a Pagula guy for long before he was even a GM. So I could sit here and yell until I'm blue in the face that they should move on from the GM, but it's the owner's call, and the owner loves him. So
if only you had palm trees, honestly.
Man, that's the other thing. He steps in it a lot in press conferences. The fact that you knew that reference, that is example enough that he steps in it. So that's how it's going here. Lindy's a legend of the team. He's the all-time winningest coach. I don't think they would take him out back if the season's going poorly. I think he probably gets the year no matter what, but we'll see. And then finally, to wrap things up quickly here. All right, you got to pick one of the 4 teams here. Montreal, Boston, Detroit, Buffalo. One of them makes the postseason. Who would you pick? Ian, we'll start with you. Would you say your home Canadiens?
Yeah, I think so. I think that they've only improved as a roster over last year. I think, the remainder of the teams that we've talked about today have not taken the steps forward yet. I think Boston, I look at Boston the same way I look at the Rangers, and like maybe they return to form a little bit, and that's part of the reason the Canadiens got in last year is because both those teams fell off. I think if you had to pick one of these teams, it's the Habs.
Ian, what about the Bruins? Or not about the Bruins, but what would you say of the 4 teams here?
Yeah, I'd easily go with Montreal as well. It pains me to say it, but I actually really enjoy watching this team. Live in Guelph, so a big Nick Suzuki guy. He helped the Guelph Storm win the OHL championship a few years back. Love the little guys in Cole Caulfield. I mentioned my keeper team. I got Slafkovsky there as well, so I'm hoping for bigger.
Lane Hudson is one of the I think going to be the most fun players in the league.
And also,
I'm telling you right now, I'm going to be angry when he doesn't make Team USA at the Olympics. I'll yell at Bill Guerin when that comes.
Not even an orientation camp.
Right. Not even at orientation camp. The guy was like one of the 10 best defensemen in the league last season.
You know who else was in an orientation camp? Alex DeBrincat, who scored 39 goals last season.
Yeah, that's a weird one, too. He should have been on the 4 Nations team.
I don't make the decisions.
We had to put old man Chris Kreider on there. Sorry, I get mad about Team USA. Brian, what about for you?
I mean,
Do I make it a
I'd
clean
love the
sweep?
I'd love to buck a trend and say the Detroit Red Wings, and I do think that is a possibility. But when I look at the teams that got better this offseason, it's Montreal. We've already said it. Acquisition of Dobson, acquisition of Zachary Bolduc, another year older for Lane Hudson. It just seems like all things point to.
Well, let me change it up then a little bit, because I think we're clean sweep. We all agree Montreal's the most likely. Let me put it a different way then, very quickly, because we went really long here. How likely is it that all 4 of our teams miss the postseason? And I think the real question there then becomes, you need a 4th Metro team to get in if you think all else is the same in the Atlantic. And I'm looking at the Rangers. There's really nobody else though. Like, I think Columbus steps back. The Islanders, Penguins, Flyers don't impress me. Like, for me, it comes down to Montreal and the Rangers for that final spot.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Yeah, I can't see or Ottawa drops out. I could see that happening.
Possible.
But who knows? Yeah, the Rangers could bounce back for sure.
I'm a big Columbus believer. I really like Jet Greaves. I am a big Marchenko booster. I think that team, Montreal, was sweating bullets last year, man. They just could not get that final point to get in. And every day it was like, we know Columbus isn't going to lose. Like, they were the don't look behind you monster last year. I'm very much like, I think if there's a team that gets in the Metro, it's going to be them. That would force all of us into an early summer of golfing.
Yeah,
I like what you said with the Rangers, because when we talked earlier about the few teams who made impactful additions, they got Vladislav Gavrikov, who is the best defenseman on the market. They did have to offload Keandre Miller to do so, but I do think that that's a definite upgrade, and they were doing so to capitalize on the now. For that hockey team. So Igor Shesterkin's still there. Artemi Panarin's still very good. I mean, they traded away Trouba and Kreider, but I don't think that's really... The JT Miller angle is the part that questions
captain.
me.
Very strange.
Very interesting wrinkle. We'll see. We'll see if JT Miller's leadership style is the kick in the butt that team needs.
It's either going to go really, really well, or it's going to go really, really poorly. For that.
Yes.
It's only going to be one of the two. So boom or bust for the Rangers. All right. Well, we wrapped up on a Metro team, but this was a Locked On NHL Atlantic Division preview. I promise you. Thanks everybody for participating. Be sure to check out Locked On Red Wings with Brian, Locked On Bruins with Ian, or Locked On Canadiens with Ian as well, as we get ready for the start of the regular season. Stay tuned to Locked On NHL throughout the coming days and throughout the coming weeks as we get ready for the start of the season. Be sure to check out Locked On Fantasy Hockey. Of course, Flip and Steal, they've got your stuff ready for all your drafting as we get closer and closer to the year. There was some Keeper League talk during this podcast today, so get a Keeper League. Keeper League hockey it's more fun than football. Keeper League, I would even say. So be sure to get in on that as well. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned here on the Locked On NHL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.